Well, you've heard of the birthers, you've heard of the truthers, you've probably even heard of the tenthers and the nullifiers. It's now time to meet the Simpson-Bowlers. Over the past few years, we've heard a lot of crackpot ideas. First, there was Donald Trump and his jolly band of truthers who, to this day, claim that President Obama certainly wasn't born in the United States, probably in Kenya. Then came the Koch brothers-funded climate change deniers. They were working on the earlier work that they had done, denying that tobacco caused cancer, who, despite record temperatures and unprecedented superstorms, insist that man-made climate change is still debatable. Like many of the same people who said about cigarettes not causing cancer. Finally, we have the tenthers and the nullifiers who want to ignore federal laws that they don't like. But none of these outlandish, frankly, insane ideas are as dangerous or as destructive, both to the United States and to us as a nation in whole, and to the working people of the United States. Now, of course, it won't affect the 1%, but to the 99% of Americans, as this new Simpson-Bowlers Cat Food Plan 2.0. Yesterday, the pair introduced a rebooted, or should we say rebaked, version of the original Simpson-Bowlers Cat Food Commission idiocy. That original plan, you'll remember, was so bad that their own commissioners wouldn't vote for it. Unfortunately, the media is still in love with these irrelevant hustlers and their crazy ideas, which makes understanding the absurdity of the Simpson-Bowlers plan really hard to understand. But let's give it a try. In the original Simpson-Bowlers Cat Food Commission plan, that pair and some of their buddies sought a whopping $2.9 trillion in budget cuts combined with $2.6 trillion in revenues. Fancy word that mostly describes increasing taxes or eliminating tax loopholes. It's about 50-50. Under the new Simpson-Bowlers Cat Food Plan 2.0, this pair of crackpots is now seeking just $1.3 trillion in revenues, meaning they jacked up budget cuts this time around to a staggering $3.9 trillion. While the original cat food plan had roughly 1-to-1 spending cuts to new revenue, the new cat food plan is 3-to-1 cuts to revenue. Simpson-Bowlers Cat Food Plan 2.0 calls for a $2.4 trillion increase in new savings, let's call it cuts, over the next 10 years through, quote, serious tax and entitlement reforms and cutting additional spending. So what are the exact cuts and reforms that Simpson and Bowles want to make in federal government spending? Well, first they want to cut Medicare and Medicaid spending, meaning fewer and fewer elderly and poor Americans will have access to health care and medications. Next, Simpson and Bowles want to enact so-called comprehensive pro-growth tax reform, a fancy way of saying, we want to give corporations even more corporate tax breaks while jacking up taxes on working people. Of the $2.5 trillion, $2.4 trillion actually is the number, in new savings that Simpson-Bowlers' Cat Food Plan 2.0 calls for, that the media is falling all over and doing everything but French kissing these guys on television, nearly $600 billion of it comes from so-called tax reform. And finally, these washed-up corporate shills want to strengthen limits on discretionary spending and reduce non-health mandatory spending, which frankly means cuts to things like Social Security, higher education, and farm subsidies, just to name a few. In other words, let them eat cat food. The bottom line here is that the Simpson-Bowlers Cat Food Plan 2.0, much like its predecessor, is entirely about helping out corporate America and the billionaires who run it and screwing over the rest of us. Along with these so-called pro-growth tax reforms come these so-called entitlement reforms, which basically argue that we have to abandon elderly, disabled, and poor Americans in order to save the American economy. Right. The only people who are happy with Simpson and Bowles' new Cat Food Plan 2.0 are the corporations and their fat cat buddies. And the corporate media, of course, which is all over these guys. Although the millionaires on TV won't tell you this, The fact is that working class Americans need to see through all the smoke and mirrors and past the media circus and realize that much like the birthers and the truthers, the Simpson-Bowlers are completely off their rockers. No country in the world has ever cut its way to prosperity. And whether Simpson and Bowles like it or not, America's not going to either. It can't be done. So, real simple. Let's roll Grandpa Simpson and Grandpa Bowles back to the old folks' home where they can't do any more damage to our economy and to our country. And let's leave the cat food for the cats. I mean, this is pretty straightforward stuff. This is not rocket science. The Congressional Progressive Caucus has actually offered a budget plan that involves raising taxes on super rich people up to 50%, the top marginal tax rate. And that's just 50%. I mean, that's lower than it was for most of the 20th century. Raising capital gains taxes. Oh, my God. Mitt Romney might have to pay the same taxes as his secretary? Yeah. Having corporations pay their fair share like they did during the Republican Eisenhower administration or the Republican Nixon administration? Oh, we can't have that. Those guys were liberals. No, they were Republicans. Come on. You know what I find so fascinating about this? Actually, so tragic about this is that if you turn on the television and you watch the corporate media, whether it's CNN or MSNBC or CNBC or Fox, those being the cable media, and then, of course, the ABC, CBS, NBC, or even the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, if you turn them on and watch them, you've got, here's the debate. You've got, on the one hand, almost 100 members of Congress elected by millions and millions of people to represent them who've put forward a good, solid plan, the Progressive Caucus's budget plan, that actually balances the budget and would work. And 100% of it is done doing things that have succeeded in the past in the United States. There's nothing new or radical about it. It's just basically going back to pre-Reagan founding principles. So on the one hand, you've got almost 100 elected members of Congress. You would think that they would have credibility. You would think that the media would want to talk to them. They represent we the people. They're members of Congress. They're people you should, capital T, take capital S seriously. And on the other hand, you've got a washed-up former Republican senator, Alan Simpson, and a washed-up former Clinton White House staffer, who, Erskine Bowles, who couldn't even get their own cat food commission to vote in favor of Cat Food Commission Plan 1.0. Nobody should be paying attention to these guys. And there should be a serious debate about what the Progressive Caucus has put forward. I mean, Jan Schakowsky came on this program and laid the damn thing out. It makes perfect sense and it works. And it balances the budget in a decade. And it does so by bringing jobs home and raising pay for people. But it's going to cut those tax loopholes for Mitt Romney and the oil companies. We can't have that. We can't even talk about that. And you will not. So you will not hear a discussion of a debate of the Progressive Caucus. You won't hear it on NPR. You won't hear it on McNeil Lehrer. You won't hear it on ABC, NBC, CBS. You won't hear it on MSNBC, on Fox, or on CNN. You're not going to hear it anywhere. Because it just takes too big of a bite out of the butts of the billionaires and the corporations who made them that way. And that's the real tragedy. Instead, we got these old washed-up shills, Simpson and Bowles.